On August 28, 2021, Kana Washino said goodbye to her mother. The 18-year-old was in her final year of high school and dreamed of becoming a nurse. She was going to meet a friend and would be home around 5 p.m. The last image we have of her is from a security camera in a Tokyo parking lot. At 3:30 p.m., she is seen walking calmly, seemingly unconcerned. She approaches a gray car, opens the back door, smiles, and gets in. The car started. Inside was a man she had considered a friend for the past 2 years. They talked every day. They trusted each other. That day, he suggested they meet in person and introduced her to his wife. The woman sat in the passenger seat, silently watching her get into the car. This couple, whom you will meet throughout this book, Evidence, had traveled through 2 provinces to pick up Kana that day, and several weeks before that, they had traveled through other provinces searching for a specific location, an abandoned log cabin, far from everything, far from everyone, where Kana would endure her hell on Earth. But who is really behind the deranged couple who just kidnapped teenage girl Kana? Will she survive the horrific plans they've devised? And how could a man she considered a friend lead her there, along with his own wife? Today we're going to delve into a case in Japan that, as time goes on, will push the boundaries of horror even higher. Welcome to episode 1 of Evidence. Our story takes place today in Japan. We've been there before on this channel in the case of Takahiro Shiraishi, the notorious Twitter killer who froze his victims in his apartment. Japan is arguably the safest country in the world. In 2021, the year our story takes place, the country had around 250 murders out of a population of 126 million. That same year, France, with a population only half that of the United States, had nearly 1,000 murders, 4 times more than the US, which also has half the population. Think about that. A safe country with a crime rate close to 0, yet an 18-year-old high school girl disappeared 3 days before her body was found in an abandoned house. To understand how this might happen, we first need to know who Kana Washino is, the victim of the serialized novel Evidence we're pursuing, who will be manipulated from beginning to end. More specifically, we'll be going to Tokyo. And note, not the picturesque Tokyo, nor the modern buildings of Shibuya. This time, we're in the city of Sumida. This is Tokyo in its everyday life. Narrow alleyways, tiny ramen shops, centuries-old temples standing tall like traditional islands in a modern ocean. A quiet and peaceful rhythm of daily life in its monotony. And Kana Washino, 18, lives in this neighborhood. Kana turned 18 when the summer of 2021 began. She lives with her parents in a modest apartment, in an ordinary and loving family. She was an outstanding senior, the kind of student teachers always wanted to emulate. Always punctual, always focused, always polite, somewhat reserved, and introverted. She ate her lunchbox alone or with 1 or 2 close friends. She never hung out in noisy groups, not out of disdain, but simply by nature. Kana dreams of becoming a nurse. She wants to help people, a beautiful act full of hope and generosity. And to achieve that, she knows she must pass the challenging entrance exams for Japanese universities. A cutthroat system where hundreds of thousands of students compete each year for just a few thousand spots. The pressure is immense. Failure is virtually not an option in a society that is unforgiving of losers. This summer of 2021, Kana is devoting her time to relentless studying. Her only way to relax was on weekends, when she allowed herself a few hours to play games. Her favorite game was an online role-playing game in which she played a healing nun. She had joined a guild, a small, close-knit group that helped each other through various adventures in the game. In this world, Kana is not just an ordinary high school girl lost in the crowd. She is important. She truly is significant. And the loneliness Kana feels is not just a fleeting teenage anxiety. It is a major social phenomenon, well documented in Japan. 1.5 million people live like this, completely isolated from social life. Tokyo had become a city where millions lived side by side in absolute solitude. And it was on Twitter in 2019 that Kana would meet someone who would completely change her life. He played the same video game as her, and they frequently visited the same online chat rooms. He understood everything she said, first about the game, then about everything and nothing at all. About their lives, their dreams, their deepest fears. The conversations often lasted until late at night. Kana felt listened to, understood, and appreciated for who she truly was. That man was Shohei Komori. He was 25 years old. There was a 7-year age difference between them. But Kana didn't know that, nor did she know that he was married. She didn't know that this encounter would determine her fate in the most tragic way possible. But to understand how Kana arrived at that cabin in the opening scene of Evidence, we need to find out who the 2 people in that car really are. And based on their profiles, you'll quickly realize we're dealing with complete idiots who, as always, will use their meager intelligence in the worst possible way. Shohei Komori, 27 years old, 2021. He comes from Yokkaichi, a medium-sized industrial city a few hours' drive from Tokyo. He grew up there with his mother and younger brother. His father is never mentioned. Missing, absent, vanished. We don't know. From a young age, Shohei was an introverted and socially awkward boy, as if he didn't understand the rules of interpersonal etiquette that others grasped instinctively. He ate alone in the cafeteria. He wasn't a top choice on any of the sports teams. He often spent his breaks sitting in a corner reading comic books. When he got to high school, he finally found a place to belong, the fencing club. It was a martial art that gave him a temporary sense of confidence. For the first time, he felt like he had found his place. But that didn't last. At boarding school, Shohei was bullied. He was forced to leave his mattress out in the rain, woken up in the middle of the night, and made to hide during exams. He couldn't escape it. He was always there, and the Japanese are notoriously quick-tempered when it comes to school bullying. Eventually, he gave up kendo and joined the computer club. And that's when everything became clear. Sitting in front of the screen, Shohei finally felt at home. Computers followed logical and predictable rules, easily understood even by someone unfamiliar with social norms. He eagerly studied the tutorials, learning HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Python. He accumulated knowledge of languages like others collect trophies. But despite that passion, Shohei couldn't finish high school. He dropped out in his third year. The pressure of being forced to socialize was immense. He withdrew and distanced himself from people. In a rigid and hierarchical Japan, without qualifications, many doors remained closed. He took on a series of precarious odd jobs. First, at a convenience store, working the night shift under the glaring fluorescent lights, mechanically scanning barcodes of onigiri. He was fired after customers complained. He never smiled and hardly ever spoke. His manager pointed that out many times. Then he found a job at an electronics store. Eventually, he could talk about computers all day long. But his social skills are terrible. That's still a problem. Shui is too introverted to be a salesperson. His business results were terrible. He got fired. At that point, he gave up and sought permanent refuge in the virtual world. There, he could be someone else, not the failure he saw in the mirror every morning. And on these social networks, protected by anonymity and distance, Shui developed a somewhat disturbing behavior. He flirted with young women, often minors, often vulnerable individuals. He spends hours crafting carefully considered messages, patiently building virtual relationships based on emotional manipulation. He, who would break out in a sweat when women spoke to him in real life, becomes a completely different person behind a screen. He polishes each sentence, deleting and starting over until the message looks perfect. He built his image from scratch, slightly mysterious, educated without being pretentious, considerate without being overbearing. An understanding friend who listens without judgment, a protective older brother, and his goal was always the same: lonely teenage girls looking for connection. He found them on social media, always starting with a casual comment on their posts to strike up a conversation. I really like your avatar. The design is incredibly unique. If you'd like, we should play games together soon. And gradually, day after day, message after message, the spider spins its web perfectly. And it was by following this familiar path that he met his future wife, Izumi, online. But before talking about Izumi, we need to mention Kana, because while Shui was building a life with Izumi, he was also managing another business simultaneously, and it was this very path he used to ensnare the teenage girl. In the summer of 2021, while Shui and Izumi were enjoying their nomadic honeymoon in increasingly dilapidated rooms, Kana was busy studying for exams. In 2019, she was only 16, and Shui was 25. He noticed her Twitter profile. She talked a lot about video games, seemed lonely, and replied to messages very quickly. The first message, then the second, and then every day. What Shui was doing to Kana had a specific name: seduction. It's a psychological manipulation technique used by predators to gain the trust of underage victims in order to exploit them. Shui pretended to be a kind and selfless friend who genuinely understood what Kana was going through. He contacted her almost obsessively, day and night. He asked her how her day at school was, encouraged her to study, and told her she was smart and talented. For Kana, at age 16, this virtual friendship was invaluable. Okay, you get the idea. Shui is a predator. But listen, the woman he married, Izumi Komori, is even more dangerous than him, and I'd even dare say she's even more out of control considering the role she'll be playing in Evidence. I'll let you hear for yourself. Izumi Komori was 28 years old at the time this story takes place. She came from Gunma, a rural prefecture north of Tokyo. Shibukawa, the city where she grew up, had a population of about 50,000. A bland, uneventful town, nothing particularly interesting happens. Shui and Izumi meet on social media, but unlike his other targets, Izumi isn't the type to be easily manipulated. She's older, less gullible, and at least as cunning as he is. She saw Shui as the perfect way to escape her current life. After several months of regular contact, she told him about her situation. As a victim of horrific domestic violence, she wanted to leave. She's completely broken down and will be out on the streets if this continues. Is that true? Well, we'll never know for sure. What's certain is that Shui is very serious about this. For the first time in his life, he was seen as a savior. He decided to play the role of a knight in shining armor. In February 2021, he went to Gunma to bring her back. What's the plan? She secretly packs her bags without telling anyone, and they leave in the night. They'll go stay with Shui's mother in Yokkaishi. Oh, how romantic, a nocturnal escape. He still told his mother about it. Note that he didn't ask her permission, he just informed her. And the next day he returned home with Izumi and 2 suitcases. Just like me. I want to tell you guys that subscribing to this channel is really great because I started to feel annoyed seeing 40% of viewers each week not pressing the subscribe button. Thank you so much, you're all so kind. But Shui's mother was an experienced nurse, accustomed to reading people, and she was suspicious from the first glance. There was something wrong with this woman, she sensed it instinctively. But she agreed to take in this complete stranger because her son pleaded with her. And this is also the first time Shui has brought his girlfriend home. So nothing remarkable yet. But when this couple suddenly appears on a crime news site, she'll be in shock. Izumi moved in, and very quickly, life in the house became chaotic. She stayed home all day, lounging on the sofa from morning till night, watching videos on her phone. She didn't go grocery shopping, didn't cook, and didn't clean. Every time Shui's mother returned home after exhausting night shifts at the hospital, she found the kitchen in a terrible state. Dirty dishes piled up in the sink, covered in dried food scraps. The living room was cluttered with empty iced tea cans and torn snack wrappers, and Izumi inevitably would once again be sprawled on the sofa, glued to his smartphone screen. After a few weeks, his mother insisted it was time for Izumi to find a job, and Izumi replied that she would think about it. The next day, the same scene occurred, and the day after that as well. When her mother pleaded with her, Izumi pulled out her business card. She was an artist. She sold her paintings online. No one in the family had ever seen her famous paintings, and no one had ever seen her paint before. Izumi deceived us endlessly, but that wasn't the worst part. A few weeks after she arrived, an official envelope arrived by mail. A letter from Shibukawa City Hall concerns child support payments. Shui's mother confronts her son. Shui reluctantly confesses. Yes, Izumi has a child from a previous relationship. She left the child with her parents when she moved away. Actually, Izumi doesn't have any children of her own. She has 3 children. 3 children she abandoned at her parents' home in Shibukawa the day she left. There has been virtually no contact since then. Throughout the months they exchanged messages online, she never uttered a word to Shui. And when he found out, he didn't offer to pick them up. He didn't have any particular feelings for that guy. He won't raise another man's children. There are 3 children somewhere. That couple doesn't see them, but they still receive benefits. These poor kids have absolutely nothing to do with this story. And perhaps that's for the best, given what's about to happen. And despite all that, the lies, the debts, the abandoned children, the long nights spent on the sofa, Shui and Izumi still got married in May 2021. The ceremony was private. There were no family, friends, or parties, just signatures and official seals on administrative forms. Shui offered a justification for his mother. Izumi needed valid identification to open a bank account and eventually find a job. Marriage would give her a new legal status. It's all nonsense, but I still mention it as a precaution. But besides her chronic laziness and obvious pathological habit of lying, there's another thing that defines Izumi, her pathological and obsessive jealousy. She constantly monitored Shui's phone, checking messages the moment he turned his back and scouring his contacts for suspicious female names. And she soon discovered that her husband had some strange hobbies, online dating with teenage girls. At this point, you might think Izumi would report it to the authorities. Her husband is mentally ill and she would file for divorce. But no, because Izumi has no job, no home, nothing at all. Conversely, she wants to do everything to keep Shui. Their relationship is toxic. They are completely dependent on each other. Izumi gave Shui things he had never had before. Her attention, her love, and even her favors. Physical favors, if you understand me. To put it more clearly, they made the tatami mat vibrate. For his part, Shui offered Izumi a level of listening and devotion she had never imagined she could receive. Their relationship wasn't a one-sided manipulation. It was a toxic dance between 2 unstable individuals. 2 manipulators of each other, each believing they held the upper hand. Of all the teenage girls Shui flirted with online, there was one Izumi would eventually find on his phone. As for Kana, she had just discovered that he was married. But one day, while browsing Twitter, Kana stumbled upon a photo Shui had just shared with a woman beside him who seemed closer than just friends. Kana realizes that the friend she thought she knew best had kept the secret from her for 2 years. She feels betrayed and alienated, but Shui doesn't give up. He constantly texts her saying he misses her and needs her. Meanwhile, he continues his double dealing with Izumi, who will soon discover it all. And prepare yourselves, because things are about to explode. Living with Shui's mother quickly turns into a nightmare. Shui grew increasingly distant from his family. He avoided his mother before apologizing and gradually isolated himself from the real world. He and Izumi lived in seclusion in their teenage bedroom, surrounded by this digital wall, spending all their time online. Shui's mother was seriously considering asking Izumi to leave. But before she could muster the courage to say it, Shui and Izumi took matters into their own hands. Late on the night of July 22nd, 2021, while their mother was at work, they sneaked away like thieves. They left a typed note on a computer and printed it on a scrap of paper. The mother discovered the note early the next morning when she returned home exhausted. No thank you, no apology for the inconvenience, not even a kind wish. She would never hear from her son again. Not a text message, not a call, complete silence. Having children is a normal thing, as people say. The couple settled in Shibukawa, Izumi City, where she left her 3 children behind. Will they ever see each other again? Absolutely not. They're constantly on the move, from the MI2 studio to a dilapidated apartment to a love hotel. Their belongings are still haphazardly packed in garbage bags, as if they're always ready to elope. 2 individuals completely incapable of adapting to life, constantly drifting towards nothingness. This explosive combination would create the perfect conditions for an impending tragedy. In July 2021, Shui had not yet cut off contact with Kana. Quite the opposite. In July 2021, he suggested that Kana come to Tokyo to meet him in person. And Kana agreed. They met at a cafe near the bustling Shibuya station, amidst the crowds. He talked for about an hour, at most 2 hours. Kana was a little nervous at first, but she gradually became more comfortable as the conversation continued. Shui was still the same as when they chatted online, gentle, considerate, and a little clumsy. As usual, he started talking about this and that, and when they parted ways on the sidewalk, Kana felt relieved. He was just a normal, harmless friend. There was nothing shady or suspicious about him. He didn't upset her or do anything inappropriate. She felt relieved. She lowered her guard. Okay, that's good. He's not a pervert or anything. She told herself she was wrong to worry. Kana felt reassured. She thought she had assessed the situation correctly. What she didn't know was that, at that very moment, Zumi had begun to suspect something. She knew Shui often chatted with young people online, but now she was starting to wonder if he met some of them in real life. Also in July, when Shui went out to buy cigarettes for about 5 minutes, Izumi looked at his phone. Did she find anything? Would that change everything? At that time, Kana and Shui had known each other for 2 years. 2 years of daily texting, conversations that lasted until the early morning hours, and shared confidences. Kana didn't even know exactly what she was doing. She guessed he was in his early 20s. He talked about work, but seemed very close to her emotionally. He carefully avoided the topic. But Kana felt strangely uneasy ever since she found out he was married. She found it increasingly strange that Shui kept pestering her. Why did he text her at all hours even when she didn't reply? Why did he need her constant attention when he already had a wife? She continued to reply out of politeness so as not to hurt his feelings, but she was gradually drifting away. At the end of July, Izumi checked Shui's phone, one of many attempts to monitor her husband. He went out to buy cigarettes at the convenience store, a maximum of 5 minutes. She opened social media and her eyes fixed on one name, Kana-chan. She started the conversation. Hundreds of messages, an intimacy that infuriated her. Kana's photos, seemingly harmless selfies that she instantly recognized as calculated attempts at seduction. And most importantly, they had met earlier this summer. Shui had never mentioned it to him. When he turned around, Izumi, seemingly floating in midair, lunged at him, brandishing her phone like a weapon. The argument quickly escalated. Phones were thrown against the wall. There was shouting and angry tears. Shui tried to justify himself. But she's just a friend, absolutely nothing to talk about. Just a friend who's been receiving hearts every day for 2 years and secretly met him without telling her wife. A rather unconvincing explanation. Izumi demanded that Shui block Kana on all platforms and delete everything. Shui promised, swore, and begged. His tone softened, but Shui didn't cut off contact. He blocked Kana for a few days, giving Izumi time to calm down. Then he quietly unblocked her and sent her a message. Kana, who had been worried about the unusual silence, felt relieved. They resumed their usual conversations. Shui carefully deleted their messages after each conversation. Meanwhile, Izumi continued to snoop through her husband's phone every day. And during one clandestine nighttime check, about a week after their argument, she was horrified to discover that Kana's phone was unlocked. Something shattered inside her. Izumi woke Shui up in a fit of rage. But this time it was different. She started packing her things and said she was leaving. Shui panicked. He didn't want to go back to his old life alone behind a computer. He begged her and finally said, "I'll do anything, just tell me what you want." Izumi was speechless. She looked at him, her eyes filled with anger and tears. And there, in that dilapidated room in Shibukawa, something terrible began to take shape. She sat down on the edge of the bed, her face hardening. "Do you really want me to stay?" "Of course I do," Izumi continued. "Then we need to settle this once and for all." Shui swallowed hard. But how? Izumi explained her solution. They would go to Kana, take her to a faraway place, and make her truly understand that she had to disappear from their lives. A deathly silence fell forever. Shui understood exactly what Izumi was implying. He could have said no, rejected it immediately, but he said nothing. He just stood there, silent, his gaze averted like a coward. He asked if, after this, she would stop doubting him, if she would stay with him. Izumi leaned forward. If he rectified his mistake, she would know that he had chosen her, that they were two people against the world, and she promised to stay forever. Shui nodded slowly. Okay. At that moment, Izumi wasn't manipulating an innocent and naive Shui. They were both accomplices, and once the plan was laid out, Shui contacted Kana. He suggested they meet soon. He wanted to introduce her to his wife. Kana accepted without hesitation. Okay, August 28th. She didn't know that she had just signed her own death warrant. So, before going any further, as this might seem a little unbelievable, we need to put things in context. Kana is currently 18 years old. She has already met Shui. Everything went well, and he admitted he was married. And now he's suggesting she meet his wife. He was completely open about being married. He didn't hide anything. From Kana's perspective, this was just a normal outing with his friend and his wife. She had no reason to suspect what was about to happen. On Saturday, August 28th, Kana was preparing to meet her friend and his wife. She said goodbye to her mother. Afterwards, she went to visit a friend. She'll be home around 5 p.m. She didn't mention the 27-year-old man she met online, nor his wife, or the car that would be picking her up. She deliberately lied because she knew her parents would object. She wasn't afraid. Shui and her friend had been talking for 2 years. At 3:30 p.m., a gray car pulled up in the parking lot. The window opened. Shui waved to her. Beside him in the passenger seat, Izumi looked her up and down. Kana sat in the back seat. The door closed. The car started moving. Kana disappeared. At that moment, Shui awkwardly tried to strike up a conversation. How's your high school studying going? Kana replied, trying to sound normal, but something felt off. Izumi hadn't said a word since they left. She stared out the window, her teeth clenched. After an hour of driving, Kana began to worry. She asked exactly where they were going. Shui gave an evasive answer. We're going home. Our house is a bit far. We should have warned you, Izumi giggled. You still need mom's permission to go out? Kana conceded. Izumi's tone was clearly contemptuous and aggressive. The discreet teenager took out her phone to check her location. They were quite far from Sumida, heading north. Before she could make a decision, Izumi suddenly turned and held out her hand. Give me your phone. Kana instinctively clutched the phone tightly to her chest. Izumi insisted. They just wanted to make sure she wouldn't cause any trouble. And with a sudden movement, Izumi snatched the device from Kana's hand. Her last connection to the outside world, to her mother, to safety, had just vanished. At Sumida, Kana's mother looked at her watch. 6 p.m. Kana should have been home an hour ago. She's not like that. She should have called. The phone rang, but no one answered. She sent a text message, but received no reply. At 6:30 p.m., her throat tightened. She called the authorities. And this time, in a high-speed car accident, the police responded immediately. After a 2-hour drive, the car stopped in front of a small, dilapidated building in Shibukawa. As soon as she got out of the car, Izumi grabbed Kana's arm, or rather, her wrist. Kana flinched in fright, and Shui pulled out some plastic ties. Kana struggled, but Izumi held her tightly while Shui tightened his grip on her wrists. The plastic straps dug into her flesh. They dragged her up to the second floor. Inside, Shui pushed her down onto the sofa and handcuffed her to the metal frame. Kana was trapped. Izumi stood in front of her, arms crossed. She wanted to clarify things. Kana knew Shui was her husband. So why did she talk to him every day? Kana replied in a soft, trembling voice that he was just talking about video games. Izumi got angry. Kana said it was a misunderstanding. Izumi yelled. Night fell over Shibukawa, and Kana gradually realized with growing dread that she wouldn't be able to go home that night. That night, Kana barely slept. She curled up on the old sofa. All her senses were on high alert. Her wrists were swollen and bruised. On the other side of the wall, Shui and Izumi were arguing fiercely. Then a heavy silence fell, almost worse than the shouting. Izumi left the room and demanded Kana's phone number. The teenager refused. Izumi grabbed Kana's hair and repeated his demand. Give me your phone number. Terrified, Kana trembled and gave him the number. Izumi locked herself in her room with the device, and her rage intensified. She had just found messages on Kana's phone exchange since Shui swore to cut off all contact. Undeniable evidence of his betrayal continued to be laid bare before her. Shui will pay the price, and so will Kana. All night, Kana thought about her mother, wondering what her mother was thinking of her at this moment. Would her mother call for help, or was she waiting until tomorrow morning? The desperate young girl tried to free herself, but it was impossible. She was completely trapped. She was allowed to go to the bathroom, but always under Izumi's close supervision. And then the night passed. Kana began to understand. If the couple had kidnapped her, it wasn't to teach her a lesson, but simply to get rid of her. The next morning, Sunday, August 29th, Shui came and untied Kana on the sofa. He still held tightly to the ropes binding her wrists. He declared that they were leaving. But where were they going? He replied that they were taking her home, but his voice sounded terribly fake. He got back in the car. This second journey seemed endless. Mountains, forests, deserted country roads. He ventured deeper into the countryside, not towards Tokyo at all. Around midday, he stopped at a roadside shop. Shui went down the stairs for about 2 minutes. He returned with a small white plastic bag. Inside was a cheap metal padlock. Sitting alone in the back with Izumi, Kana desperately tried to evoke his sympathy. She begged to be allowed to leave. She promised not to tell anyone, that she would disappear completely from their lives. Izumi stared at her through the rearview mirror with an unreadable expression. And then she smiled. A cold and terrifying smile. That smile spoke volumes about her deepest fears. They wouldn't let her leave alive. Kana understood she wouldn't be able to go home. What she didn't know was where they were taking her and what they intended to do with her in that wooden house. Even the investigators found it hard to believe. Late in the afternoon, the vehicle arrived in Ayakawa, a remote village of 1,000 residents nestled in the Yamanashi Mountains. This place is famous for being home to the world's oldest continuously operating hotel, Nishiyama Onsen Keiyonkan, founded in 705 AD and run by the same family for 52 generations. A remarkable legacy, a unique character beyond the evidence logo, and hundreds of books about serial killers. That's all I can add at this point. It's not as impressive as a mountain hotel. Unfortunately, as you might guess, we won't be heading up the mountain to relax in a hot spring today. Shui and Izumi discovered this place on a road trip a few weeks ago. An abandoned wooden house, far from any other residential area, hidden by trees. Excellent. The car stopped a few meters from the warehouse. Izumi ordered Kana to get out. She was motionless, paralyzed with fear. Izumi screamed. Shui opened the car door and pulled Kana out by the arm. She struggled, but he was much stronger. Together, they dragged her to the dilapidated building. The door creaked open. Inside, it was shrouded in suffocating darkness, damp and dusty. The place reeked of mold and neglect. The floor was made of crumbling wood, and the walls were rotting away with age. Shui pushed Kana forcefully inside. She collapsed to the ground, tears streaming down her face. Please don't hurt me. Shui and Izumi exchanged glances. Something quiet flowed between them. Now was the time to decide. Izumi took a piece of string from her pocket. She approached Kana, walked around the teenager, and then stood behind her. Realizing what was happening, Kana screamed in terror. But no one heard her within miles around. All around them were elderly people with hearing impairments, relaxing and snoring in the hot springs of a hotel a few kilometers away. Izumi looped the rope around the girl's neck and began to tighten it. Kana struggled to free her bound hands. She clawed at her attacker's face. She tried to grab the rope, to loosen the deadly grip. But Izumi tightened her hold even tighter. Shui held her tightly, his expression cold. Kana's lungs felt like they were on fire. Her vision blurred. The little girl thought about her mother, about her dream of becoming a nurse, about all the things she would never be able to do. Izumi screamed for Shui to help. Kana struggled too much. Shui pulled an 18-centimeter-long knife from his pocket, and without warning, he stabbed her. Once, then a second, then a third. Kana collapsed. Izumi released the rope, and for the fourth time, he struck hard between her shoulder blades with all the strength he had. Then he dropped the knife to the ground. Kana was still breathing weakly. Her breathing was becoming increasingly labored. Blood flowed from her mouth. Shui and Izumi stood there motionless, watching the 18-year-old girl slowly die at their feet. They didn't say a word. They didn't move. And after a few long, drawn-out minutes, Kana breathed her last. Her chest stopped rising and falling. Her eyes were open, but completely empty. Kana Washino was dead. A terrifying silence enveloped the wooden house. Shui knelt down and untied the plastic straps from Kana's bag. He tossed them into his pocket. Why? Perhaps a touch of belated regret. Perhaps he was no longer sane, lost in a fog of panic and denial. Meanwhile, Izumi laughed. A worried laugh. She repeated that they had done it. They really had done it. Shui didn't smile. He stared at Kana's bloody corpse, his eyes wide open. Izumi trembled. They had to leave. They hadn't done anything to clean up or hide the evidence. Either shocked or completely out of control, perhaps both. Izumi grabbed the padlock and locked the back door, as if a simple lock could conceal their crime forever. Then he returned to the car. Shui got into the driver's seat and started the engine. But the police car had already started moving, and their escape was about to be abruptly halted. The day before the murder, late on August 28th, Kana's mother had reported her daughter's worrying disappearance to the Sumida police. And especially in a high-risk family situation, as I mentioned earlier, the police immediately began searching for the teenager. There was no running away from home or dating. The investigation started right away. What a relief. The investigators wasted no time. They didn't just wait 48 or 72 hours, as in some other countries, where every case of a teenager running away from home is attributed to a boyfriend or a minor crisis. They listened to this distraught mother. They heard that her daughter was responsible and would never disappear, even for an hour, without contacting anyone, and they believed her. As soon as the disappearance was reported, the authorities immediately mobilized all available resources. The investigation team obtained footage from surveillance cameras installed near Kana's home in Sumida. From the very first checks, they were able to track her. They saw her walking alone on the street and stopping when she reached the parking lot. Then, an ordinary gray sedan came into the camera's view. Kana approached without hesitation, opened the rear door, and got in. The car sped away. The entire incident lasted less than 2 minutes. Investigators had their first crucial clue: a suspicious vehicle with an easily readable license plate. They immediately began a computer search of the National Vehicle Registration Database. Within minutes, they had a name: Shui Komori, 27, officially residing in Shibukawa, Gunma Prefecture. The police immediately contacted Shui's family, but his distraught mother explained that he had left without a word, and she hadn't seen him since the beginning of July. She had no idea where he was. To track the car's route, investigators are using a technology that is both incredibly effective and somewhat unsettling. System N, a nationwide network of traffic surveillance cameras covering almost every corner of Japan. This large-scale surveillance system was gradually deployed in the 1980s to combat terrorism and crime. The basic idea is simple: install cameras equipped with automatic license plate readers on all major roads across the country. These cameras scan all passing license plates in real time and record the license plate number, exact date, specific time, and GPS location into a central database accessible to law enforcement agencies. Essentially, the Japanese authorities could track any registered vehicle in real time over hundreds of kilometers across the entire archipelago. Needless to say, these two deranged individuals were in serious trouble. Investigators entered Shui's license plate number into a database, and all the routes from the preceding days came to light. From Tokyo to Gunma, then from Gunma to Yamanashi, then from Yamanashi to Nagano, camera after camera, kilometer by kilometer, they tracked the fugitive couple. Investigators tracked this completely erratic and illogical route on screen and realized something was amiss. Why go to Gunma first, then down to Yamanashi, then back to Nagano? Why such disjointed back and forth trips? What were they looking for in these remote rural areas? On August 30th, 2021, just 49 hours after Kana's disappearance was reported, Japanese authorities found Shui's car parked at a highway rest area in Nagano. An investigative team was on the scene. They observed the parked car. In the parking lot, 4 unmarked vehicles silently guarded the area. About 10 plainclothes officers closely monitored the surroundings from various strategic points. They received strict orders not to intervene prematurely until the suspects were out of the vehicle. He might be armed and dangerous, and he could harm Kana. He might take innocent hostages and even harm himself. So be patient. And as Shui and Izumi left the resort building and headed towards their car, the police surrounded them. An officer asked, "Shui Komori? Izumi Komori?" The pair nodded slowly. They didn't even try to run away or resist. They knew it was over, it was all over, and they surrendered without any resistance. The lead investigator immediately asked, "Where is Kana Washino?" And quite unexpectedly, the couple confessed instantly, without any attempt at denial or negotiation. Shui replied, his voice choked with shame. "He was murdered. His body is in an abandoned shack in Ayakawa, Yamanashi Prefecture. I can show you the location on a map." Shui and Izumi were immediately handcuffed, separated, and taken to the police station. Meanwhile, another team was rushing to Ayakawa to verify the report and secure the crime scene. After an hour of searching the mountainous area in the dead of night, they found the abandoned wooden house. The old wooden door was locked with a very strange-looking padlock. The officers easily pried open the door, which creaked open with a terrifying groan that shattered the silence of the night. One of the investigators switched on his flashlight. The beam slowly swept through the pitch-black interior of the house, and there, in the corner of the room, they discovered Kana Washino's body. She lay on the rotting wooden floor. Her eyes were open but vacant. The rope was still wrapped around his neck. Blood had dried on his tattered clothes, forming thick, dark stains. Several police officers appeared, startling even the most seasoned investigators. Those who had witnessed dozens of crime scenes were utterly shocked by the horrific sight before them. Such a young girl had died in such cruel and brutal circumstances. Forensic technicians entered the house and began their meticulous work. They photographed the crime scene from every angle. They collected traces, fingerprints, and biological evidence. They found the blood-stained knife lying carelessly on the ground a few centimeters from the body. The blade was completely covered in dried blood. Shui and Izumi's clear fingerprints were imprinted all over it. The DNA of the murderous couple would easily be identified on the rope still tightly wrapped around the victim's neck. 4 deep stab wounds, strangulation marks on the neck, and bruises on the wrists. And to give you an idea of how much this case shocked public opinion, at around 5 a.m. on the morning of August 31st, Tokyo police held a press conference. This is a rare practice in Japan, reserved only for serious cases that attract significant attention. The official police spokesperson entered the room and began in a somber voice. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, we have an important and heartbreaking announcement regarding the disappearance of 18-year-old Kana Washino, a resident of Sumida, Tokyo. Washino's body was found this morning in an abandoned house in Ayakawa, Yamanashi Prefecture. She was the victim of a murder. 2 suspects were arrested last night in Nagano. They are Shohei Komori, 27, and his wife Izumi Komori, 28, both residents of Shibukawa, Gunma Prefecture. News spread like wildfire across Japan. Television channels suspended their regular programming to broadcast special news reports. Social media exploded. The hashtag Kana Washino is trending in Japan. A couple kidnapped and brutally murdered an innocent high school girl in Japan. It's unbelievable. Okay, so for those of you who have been following me for a while, you know I'm writing a book of true stories about Japan. To be honest, I don't know much myself. I've just done a little research on the subject. That doesn't make me an expert, but it's not as safe as you might think. By the way, if you're interested, this book is also available in audiobook and print versions. The trial of Shuei and Izumi Komori began in June 2023, almost 2 years after Kana's murder. It was certainly a premeditated crime. Beforehand, they had found a secluded spot. They brought rope and a knife. They bought a padlock and lured Kana into a trap by making her believe it was a friendly encounter. This wasn't a crime committed out of impulse, an accident, or a moment of madness. It was a planned execution of an 18-year-old girl. On June 2nd, 2023, Shuei and Izumi walked into the courtroom handcuffed, escorted by police officers. Judge Takanobu Sumeya opened the trial. He asked in a stern voice, "Shuei Komori, Izumi Komori, you are charged with premeditated murder, kidnapping, and disposal of the body in the case of Kana Washino. Are you guilty or not?" Shuei replied in a voice barely audible. "Guilty," Izumi repeated in a flat tone. "They are guilty. Their lawyers are trying to minimize their criminal liability in order to get a reduced sentence." Shuei's lawyer explained that his client fears the police will find out what they did. It was out of fear of being caught and imprisoned that they decided to kill her. It wasn't a cold, calculated plan, but a decision made under the terrible pressure of circumstances. Yes, my Kana was still being held captive in an apartment and was still alive until she ended up in the warehouse. They could have let her go anytime they wanted. She wasn't an 18-year-old girl who could pressure them into tying her up and stabbing her. Come on, don't overreact. For her part, Izumi's lawyer is attempting a different defense argument. She claims that Izumi suffered from a severe psychological dependency disorder related to Shuei and was in a state of mental decline at the time of the incident. Essentially, she is trying to argue that her client wasn't actually responsible for her actions but was psychologically controlled by her husband. Judge Sumeya completely rejected this argument. After carefully reviewing the entire case, the court concluded that Shuei and Izumi's actions were cruel and premeditated. After numerous hearings, hearing all the testimony and considering all the evidence, the Tokyo court delivered its final verdict on June 28th. Shuei Komori was sentenced to 25 years in prison by the prosecutor but received 23 years. Izumi Komori was sentenced to 22 years in prison but received 18 years. The court explained that Izumi held a subordinate position to Shuei. You heard that right. The court is essentially saying that Izumi was manipulated by Shuei even though she was the one who looked at the phone and suggested arranging the threesome. This is absurd. Meanwhile, Shuei received a harsher sentence because he was the one who inflicted the 4 fatal stab wounds. After the verdict was announced, Kana's family lawyer held a press conference outside the courthouse. He solemnly declared, "The court has shown utter disregard for Kana's life. Sentences of 23 years and 18 years in prison are far too lenient for such a brutal and premeditated crime." Kana's family is deeply disappointed and outraged by the court's verdict, but there is still a psychological aspect to consider. How could a couple end up in such a situation? The court tried to explain. I've summarized the whole case, don't worry. Izumi is a woman deeply haunted by her own failures. She abandoned her 3 young children at her parents' house without hesitation. She is burdened with enormous debts that she will likely never be able to repay. She has no stable job, no source of income of her own. She was completely dependent on Shuei, both materially and emotionally. Throughout her unfortunate life, Izumi was always defined by failures. Failures in her studies, failures in her career, failures in her role as a mother. She's 30 years old and hasn't accomplished anything. And when she discovers Shuei even has a purely platonic friendship with a young girl, she completely loses control of herself. Kana represents everything she isn't and will never be. Kana is young, intelligent, and has concrete plans for the future. The fact that Kana has never had any romantic feelings for Shuei doesn't matter. In Izumi's distorted mind, Kana came to steal her husband, to steal the only thing she has left. Izumi unleashed all her pent-up frustration and rage on the teenager in a violent manner. Killing her was her way of reclaiming control of her life, which was slipping away from her grasp. Unfortunately, Shuei's cowardice only accelerated that process. Throughout his miserable life, he always avoided confrontation instead of facing things head-on. So when Izumi coldly declared they would kill Kana to settle the matter once and for all, he didn't say, "No, I'm crazy, I refuse." No, he simply said, "Okay," as he always agreed to everything in his life. He yielded to Izumi's demands because he feared losing her and being left alone. Izumi, however toxic and dangerous she may be, is the first woman he's ever accepted to be with. He's willing to do anything to keep her, even kill an innocent 18-year-old girl. Kana's death has forced Japan to react. Programs to prevent child abuse are being implemented in schools. Kana's parents established a fund named after her, and at the first conference in 2022, her mother spoke. She recounted the signs she had overlooked and concluded she wanted to become a nurse to save lives. In a way, she has now achieved that. Shohei and Izumi Komori will be released after about 15 years with the possibility of a reduced sentence for good behavior. They will be able to rebuild their lives. However, Kana will never have that chance. If you watched this evidence episode to the end, please comment couple, because Kana has fallen into an awkward situation with a crazy couple who have turned her life into a living hell. Feel free to comment and let me know your thoughts on the quotes for Shohei and Izumi. This is Max Keys. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Your support is always appreciated and helps the channel a lot. We'll meet again next Friday at 6 p.m. to hear a new story, one that's both true and terrifying. And then, goodbye.